That life you always wanted, but you didn't know. 'Cause you didn't know.
Hello and welcome to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're a startup church we just planted in September 2020. And at the Kalamazoo Church, we believe that Christianity is done best when it is done together. And so if you live in the Kalamazoo area, we would love to connect. Be it coming to a Sunday service, one of our small groups, or even just grabbing coffee with a member to learn more. You can visit kalamazoo.church in order to do that. We pray that you are inspired by what you hear today. A few hands up. Yeah, and so I think our brackets are not yet busted, hopefully, for many of us, unless you had Ohio State going very far. Tough luck. I was talking, and actually it is an awesome time to be a fan of Michigan, though, isn't it? Yeah. Because Ohio State lost, and Michigan State lost, right? And you're like, this is awesome. You know, all I need is a couple more wins from Michigan, and it's like the most amazing springtime of all time. So you guys can open up to Ruth. We'll be there in a minute. Yeah, there you go. So last week, me and Bianca, and then Kelsey was as well, and Andrea was for some time. We were actually in Lansing, Michigan, to hang out with the church a little bit over there, and then we also got an opportunity to really see Maddie. Our sister Maddie was she met us, and it's not exactly halfway. I don't even know the exact length, but it was an awesome time to be able to hang out, and we got an Airbnb over there. And I don't know if you've ever been to some of these Airbnbs nowadays where you go in and it looks like the most desolate kind of apartment complex, and you feel guilty right away, and you're a little bit scared, and it seems shady, and then you walk in and it's like the most beautiful thing. There's a bunch of nice rooms. All the furniture's set up perfectly. It's like this homey environment. And then you walk back out and you're like, wow, it smells like something was cooking over here. And it's just like this gross place. So that's where we stayed at. And I would stay again. It was I really left feeling like this is a really nice place. So there you go. That was our experience in Lansing. The church says hello. The church is inspired by you guys. I know that, for so many of us, it's inspiring to look at them. And they started as a group that was quite small, if not the same size as us, maybe even a little bit smaller. And they've grown now to be over 100 members, over 100 committed disciples, which is what is so encouraging. It was so cool. They have 2 different church services. And so I got to preach twice the same lesson. And that is a weird experience in and of itself. But it was cool even hearing him say that, we either might have to move to 3, or we're going to have to do something, or maybe the governor will just loosen up everything. But however you figure, there's too many people coming to this, after, this 10:30 service. And so it was cool. It was cool to be able to interact with a new church or a different church. I'd never been to a service, but you understand they're people that are committed to following God, and there's nothing cooler than that, right? We're over here in Ruth. We've been talking about selflessness, and I've been reading through and listening to and reading Jewish oral tradition, and actually reading the Bible and listening to podcasts about this book. And it's been super exciting for me. And the difficulty, right, with reading anything is you feel like you have so much information and so much content. You're like, how can I share this in an effective way in 25 or 30 minutes? And so I hope to do that. If I don't do that, all that means is that you should tune in, listen in and read the book of Ruth for yourself. Oh, amen? Amen. There you go. So if it's the worse the lesson is, the more it necessitates you reading the Bible yourself. So if it's a bad lesson, that's the goal. If it's a really good lesson, hopefully you leave feeling like you want to read the book anyways. So that I hope that's where you leave, is what I should say. Here we go. The title of the lesson today is Sincerity Doesn't Equal Selflessness. Sincerity doesn't equal selflessness. And our big takeaway is that our lives need to continue to be called higher by our commitment to give to God and our continual trust in the words of those closest to us. And so we're going to look at the example that Ruth sets for all of us as we really try to do that in an effective way. My first point this morning is selflessness gives until it hurts. We're over here, we're in Ruth 1. And so a little bit of background. Again, it's quite difficult, I think, to dig into a whole book in the Bible in just this little block. But there's three main characters. There's Boaz, there's Ruth, and there's Naomi. And we're actually going to talk about another character named Orpah. And so we'll figure out the relevance. I would say, and I would put before us that perhaps Orpah has more relevance for you and I than Ruth even does so often. Now, so basically what's going on, there's a famine in Judah, in these people's area, and then they decide in order to get some food, we're going to move to Moab, which is just about 50 miles away, and we're going to move to Moab, and there's no famine over there, and what happens is Naomi and her husband, there's children that they have, and then the children end up getting married to Moabite women, which is not actually like true, very traditionalist Jews will say that was against tradition or that was against what they should have done. It's actually not true. God said don't marry Canaanites. He didn't say don't marry Moabites. We understand how, it wasn't helpful later on, but that's maybe more of an aside than anything. So they end up marrying these women, and then the husbands, the sons of Naomi, die. And so does the father, or so does her husband. And so we're left now with three widows, if you'll work with me. We have Naomi, who's the mom, and then we have the mothers-in-law, the daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. And so we'll read here, starting in verse 8. It's in Ruth 1. It says, Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, We will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Pause here. And so we're seeing now these two characters really be built up. And so you've got one, and you think about being in this situation. Naomi is concerned with her daughters-in-law. Hey, you guys are widows, but you don't have to be widows. It is perhaps if you stay where you're at now, instead of going back with me, you'll find a husband. It'll be well with you. And in this day and age, this culture, that widows, there was very little opportunity to make money. There was very few opportunities financially. Really, you were pretty much confined, especially if you didn't have any relatives, you were pretty much confined to begging or to being kind of the last in line. And so she said, you don't have to be the last in line. There's an opportunity for you. And what does it say that both of these women did? They both cried. They both said, no, I don't want to. No, I'll stay. They were both extremely sad. And yet one of them decided to go, and then the other stayed put. Yeah. And I'm actually really struck by this. The image that I get, I don't know if you guys have ever, when you guys go to a restaurant or something like that, maybe you go and you guys understand the credit card shuffle, don't you? where you sit down, you're like, okay, we had a great meal, and now it's time to pay, and oh yeah, I'm trying to find my wallet, and you're trying to find your wallet, and you're like, I got it. I'm like, no, I got it. No, I got it. And we go back and forth, and you're trying to find it, and I remember this credit card shuffle, it kind of keeps going until someone relents and is like, okay, you got it. And I know for myself, there was one time I guess he's my stepfather-in-law. That's it. Yep. Stepfather-in-law. It was the first few times that I've met him. And so we're going out, we're in Milwaukee. So we're in my city. And so we went to this, nice place and we got some food. And it's I'm like, okay, I don't know if I was prepared to pay for this meal here. And so, I'm not sure that he's expecting me to pay for the meal either. I think he's a very generous guy, actually. I don't think he's expecting me to pay for this meal. But how am I going to finesse it that still saves me and makes me feel better and not look like a fool while also not paying for this meal? Am I the only one who's been here? Or have you? Okay, all right. And so I work this out and I'm like, okay. The bill comes, and first, I'm actually content if we split it up into two bills, but I'm like, that looks really weird. And so how many, and the waiter comes, just one bill, and I wait, because maybe Pablo will say two bills, and then I'm like, okay, we're absolved, and he says one bill. So I'm like, okay, so he said one bill, and so, but I was the one that was ordering the food, and so, now the waitress could either give it to me or give it to him. And so now the waitress is very wise, puts it right in the middle of both of us. And so I'm going to get my wallet here. And Pablo gets his, he said, I got it. Don't worry. I was like, oh, no, I can do it. And he said, no, I can do it. And I said, okay, you got it then. And so he picks it up. And then this is to save face. I said, well, I'll pay for the tip. How about that? And he said, dude, if you're not going to pay for the whole thing, don't pay for the tip either. And I was like, yeah, then you got it. There you go. I do get the image that Orpo was maybe in a similar spot of the credit card shuffle, though, right? That there's an opportunity and you know what you should do. You know what the right thing is. Maybe you want to be generous, but you don't want it to hurt you that much. Yeah. And I think this is such a beautiful communication of our relationship to God. And this is where it becomes very difficult, because we understand that when we give to God, He always gives back way more. But really the heart, or one of the things that we have to try to be, if we're trying to be strong disciples, followers of Christ, is to be those who are not just looking at, this is what I'm getting in return, but we need to be those who are able to give selflessly until it hurts. Think about what it says. When Naomi realized Ruth was determined, she stopped. Think, how determined are you this morning to give until it hurts? It is so cool. You can just reference it or write it in your notes. It's in 2 Samuel 24. Really cool. So, spoiler alert. David is actually Ruth's great grandson. But it says this heart is communicated so well. 2 Samuel 24 and verse 22, it says, Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah, gives all this to the king. Araunah also said, may the Lord your God accept you. But David replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. This is the heart that David had. I'm sure it was, honestly, so much of it was passed down through the lineage from his great grandma, that I'm not going to give to God unless it costs me something. This becomes difficult the deeper you get in your walk with God, doesn't it? When you're first starting out, maybe you're in the camp where you're just getting back involved with God, and that's exciting and that's awesome. And sometimes that necessitates the little bit of faith that says, I'm going to show up to church on Sunday. And that's some faith. That is giving to God. That's a sacrifice. But after you've come around for weeks and months, now it stops being a sacrifice and it starts being something that's just built into your schedule, isn't it? And so now if we are going to be those who give selflessly to God until it hurts, then there has to be things that are continually added onto our plates. And there has to be a dynamic growth in our relationship with God. This is what Ruth lived out. She said, it's going to hurt me. I'm giving up any opportunity to be a married woman. But I'm doing it, and don't question me about it. I'm doing it because I desperately love you. And this is such a beautiful, again, example of how we ought to act towards God. It's so cool. You can go to Ruth 2 and keep turning. The truth is that God actually is so often, and you read Jesus' words, he gives people just about every out. He gives, and it was actually really encouraging. So, just yesterday, I believe all, if not many of you know that Gavin McNaughton was baptized yesterday into Christ, and he was baptized, and it's a beautiful moment, right? His sins are forgiven. He is part of God's family. From that point on, continues to repent, continues to be forgiven. It's inspiring. But we did this final sit down, basically. And we made absolutely clear, Gavin, we're going to give you every out to turn away from God. Where, you have every opportunity to say, you want to push it back. There's something you can't give up, then don't give it up. We are in so many ways, literally, for this purpose of this time that we get together, we're playing devil's advocate. And it was so inspiring to hear him steadfastly. If I don't do this now, there's no better time. I need to do this now. I have been thinking about this day for the last 3 weeks since you even brought it up. And this has been in my mind and on my heart. This is what I need to do for God. And is there anything you're not willing to give up? He said, nothing. Is there any relationship that's above God? He said, nothing. Is there anything inside of you that you can't put on the cross as you die to your sins? He said, there's nothing. Such a beautiful example and an expression that I'm giving it all to God. So God gives us this morning, he gives us so many outs. I want to ask you guys, just this last week, where have you taken an out? Where have you allowed yourself your heart not to be pricked in a way to turn to God? Where have you allowed yourself to cut the edge off some kind of a difficult conversation, a difficult interaction with God when he was challenging you? We'll keep reading here. We're trying to follow this narrative. It's in Ruth 2 now, in verse 8. It says, so now what happens is they go back to the homeland, basically, and Ruth is interacting with this guy. She's basically just grabbing some grains, following after those who follow after, essentially, and just grabbing some grains in an effort to feed her mother-in-law and her. And she interacts with this guy named Boaz. And it says, so Boaz said to her, my daughter, listen to me. In verse 8, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you're thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you noticed me, a foreigner? Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Stop here. And so Ruth, you understand, she's not expecting anything. She's content. She's going to die a widowed woman, and she actually totally committed that before God, that I'm going to be with Naomi the entire way. And yet it's pretty inspiring, isn't it, that whenever we do things, whenever we act on spirituality, people notice. That's just true. We're not doing it to get noticed, but that is just true. People are so drawn to characteristics of Jesus, aren't they? And we understand it from reading the Bible, right? Jesus wasn't this guy that just went about doing and said this thing. He wasn't actually even intent on gaining a following. He just knew by living according to how the Bible taught, he was going to develop a following so powerful that we're literally looking at these scriptures and being inspired by it to this day. And so if we do anything for spirituality, in the name of spirituality for Jesus, people are going to notice. But it's not for them to notice, really. We're not doing it to get noticed. My second and final point is selflessness is confidence in things unseen. So if the first part of this lesson is talking about our relationship with God and the type of relationship that we're just giving until it hurts, then this second point I really want to communicate is our relationship as it relates to one another and a true followership of one another, not putting what somebody says above what the Bible teaches, but paying it great mind. We're over here and I'm gonna just read through a little bit. We're really trying to follow the narrative as best as possible, and we're probably doing a very incomplete job of it. But it's in Ruth 2 now, in verse 22. So now Ruth goes back and she says, hey, I've got this, what it equates to 30 pounds of grain that Boaz gave me. And Naomi understands, hey, this is too much. This guy, there's some special attention he's paying to you. So it's a good thing. Stay there. And it says in verse 22, Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it will be good for you, my daughter, to go with the women who work for him, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. So she has some kind of an idea. But Naomi says something to Ruth and she listens. Now keep dropping down here. We'll go to Ruth 3. Some time goes on and now Naomi has this plan that she cooks up. And she kind of frames it a little bit. And in verse 5, Ruth says, I will do whatever you say. Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Naomi says something and Ruth listens. And this plan, there's a lot of, you can read it at a separate time and look into some of what it means. And there's a lot of inferences we'd have to make. We're wading in water. I'm wading in water if I'm trying to explain it. That's a little bit too deep that I'm going to sink or I'm going to drown pretty quickly. There's a lot of cultural things that are communicated, and there's even this Jewish oral tradition that would say different things and they can't necessarily even agree. But basically Naomi says this is the way, if you're going to have a husband, this is the way to do it while maintaining your composure and acting in a godly manner. It's a little bit confusing, but Ruth says, okay, whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it. And then in verse 10, so she does this thing, and now it's Ruth 3:10. It says, the Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You've not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So guardian redeemer, in that time, what it meant is that there was a relative that in the event of a tragic death, they would basically take up the family, and it was a sign for the family that you're still supported. And so there's this, Boaz was their guardian redeemer, but it says there's a relative that was a little bit closer to that would be next in line and have the opportunity to do it first. Certainly it was great honor to be able to help. And so then Boaz goes and he asks the next morning, he says, hey, I want to figure this out. Are you willing to take up this land? And the person says, yeah, I can take it up. And he says, well, if you take the land, then you'll also have to take this woman as well and support her. And he says, nope, that's too much for me. And so, and Boaz, as he's hearing it, even if you, again, read it when you get a chance, it's actually really cool. Like you get the image of Boaz. He's like, I need to finesse this in such a way to paint it to be such a heavy weight. I really want this woman. She is awesome. She is so godly and so spiritual, and I'm just intent on her. And so he frames it in such a way, and he does it effectively, and he gets 10 judges to be able to look, or rather 10, not judges like rulers in that time, but the 10 people to look and really discern, okay, this is the way, we're all kosher. Okay, now, cool, I can be this redeemer for this woman. And even in verse 18, it just says, then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. She was proven right. I want to pull out here just the humility that Ruth had as she was interacting with Naomi. That you think about, if Ruth was on her own, she wouldn't have been able to know any of really even the cultural expectations. She probably wouldn't have even pursued this relationship in any way, shape, or form. She would have loved God. Certainly she would have continued to give her life to God. But there's something that she would be missing that it wouldn't be as rich as an interaction as she was able to have. I want to make a distinction. I really want to say that this is so important in our spiritual journeys, to be those who are great followers of fallible people. Think about how selfless it truly is to be a great follower of somebody who is fallible, who makes mistakes just like you. It's such a vulnerable spot to be in. In so many ways, it's way less vulnerable to follow Jesus, right? We understand he never did anything wrong. His Bible's always true, and I can always follow it, and yet there's a difficulty in saying, I'm going to make myself somebody who does not put this person's word above what God teaches, but is able to follow wholeheartedly. I would say this is one of the major things that if you look at so many Christian denominations over the last X amount of years, maybe just life denominations, there gets to a point of maturity when individuals are no longer willing. They start out with good hearts, but then they're no longer willing to actually submit themselves to one another. And they're no longer willing to take the advice of men. They've become too smart, too wise, too smart, too thoughtful. They know the right way and what to do. So what happens is, slowly but surely, without fail, you get to see, and you can look at whole churches that are like this for sure. Maybe you've been a part of some. I know that there's been more than a few times where I've been in churches that I feel like, man, we are on the brink, where if there's not individuals in other people's lives to a greater degree, I'm scared at what's going to happen in about 15 years. And then slowly but surely, and it's not through sinister, evil intentions, these groups go down and down and down. And it's just from this lack of following fallible people, this lack of submitting ourselves to fallible individuals. In Proverbs 12:15, it says, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. And so what's the assumption here then is that what I naturally want to do and the way that seems right to me is not always the right way, right? And so maybe you would say, if you're in a camp that says, well, everything, I just share what's going on in my life, and everyone just agrees with me. Well, to that I would say either you're asking the wrong questions or you're asking fools. And I don't want to be somebody who everyone agrees with, that I'm asking the wrong people. I'm just asking fools that just agree with me. Or maybe I give off a demeanor that communicates I already have it all figured out and I'm too standoffish to learn. And I don't want to do that either. This stuff is so hard though, isn't it? I think about in my relationships. So you guys got an opportunity, many of you, to meet Mark Kang. He was my campus minister years ago. And I remember as I was really trying to get into a relationship with Bianca, I remember the advice he gave to me. So we were sitting down And it was after, we just got some food, and I was a sophomore, and so he wasn't like my main mentor guy, but my main mentor guy wasn't in a relationship. And so I was like, well, I really want to ask somebody who's been around the block and been there, done that. And so I was like, hey, Mark, help me out here. I've kind of been open to Bianca for a while. We're good friends. I prayed about it. I really do like her. What do I do? And he said, amen. He said, okay, you're going to be away for the summer. You guys are going to spend the summer away from each other. It's going to be very tough to be in a relationship. Then just continue to be friends. Wait till the end of the summer. And then sometime around the beginning of September, you guys will probably start dating. And I was like, is that like, I guess that's how it works. I don't know. I hadn't been in a relationship in God's kingdom, or any serious relationship in God's kingdom. So I was like, I suppose, I guess, fine, okay. And so I tried to follow the advice and he said, hey, you can't focus just on one person. You're gonna get weird, man. You gotta be friends with everybody and not just show her all the attention. I was like, no, you're right. That's not a good idea. And so I tried to be friends with everybody and I remember this plan totally backfired on me. Really, like the advice that was given is basically, this is foolish. I'm actually embarrassed to even say, but it's a done deal. You'll end up being in a relationship with her. You'll date her pretty soon here. And I remember sharing that and I was like, yeah, we went to this same ministry and training program. And I remember trying to follow his advice. And so I'm not showing Bianca any extra attention. When we'd be in a circle, there was a group of 25, right? And we were together all day. And so it's tough not to show someone any attention when you're in a group of 25 for 3 weeks, and so we'd see each other and it's like, hey, and then whenever she'd be in a group and it would just be us two and maybe people would leave, I would just awkwardly walk away. And it was just, there was this weird, interaction. Then one of my friends pulled me aside. He said, hey dude, you're acting really weird. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm trying to follow advice. And he said, yeah, dude, but like if you guys are just together, like, and it's natural, like I don't know why you'd run away from that. I was like, nah, that's kind of true. I don't have to run away from when we're just talking together. That's true. And so I remember coming back then and this is a longer story than I intended it to be. I'm sorry. But I came back and I talked to Mark and I said, hey, Mark, it's September now. Me and Bianca, we talked a little bit, but nothing. I was like, it's September now. I don't know if she likes me, and I don't know if I could ask her to date, actually, bro. Like and he was like, well, I guess then just wait some time. And I'm like, what? Wait some time? You told me this advice, and then now you're making me wait some time. And it's good to wait some time because there's no, I knew she wasn't even going to say yes if I asked her to date me at that point. Like I was just positive. But I'd be lying. Like the point that I'm trying to bring is that it was, hear me now. I don't think it was the best of advice given to me, in the most matter-of-fact tone. I think was not super helpful. And so I'd be lying if there were many times throughout the next 2, 3, 4, and 7 years that there's not been times where I've had to consciously say, and at this point I actually don't think about it much at all, but wow, Mark, although he gave me advice that wasn't the best years ago, it still is going to be extremely selfless. It's going to be even more selfless of me to follow what he's saying now. He didn't give me stuff that wasn't gospel. He didn't lead me totally astray, whatever. And everything kind of worked out, I think. But that's the difficulty. What's the difficulty with following fallible people, isn't it? We're not putting it above God, but there has to be people in our lives who are able to lead us on the proper path. I think so. This is a couple of years ago. We were practicing for this volleyball game, and basically I saw this. This is at a church that's in Milwaukee, and they just asked the question, "Who is discipling you?" And then there's some stuff that's written down, and I was actually really drawn to this sheet. Who is discipling you? And people would write down, and I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of spiritual people. They say, God's discipling me. Jesus is discipling me. God is discipling me. I'm discipling. There's one that says, I'm discipling myself. And let that not be what we would say. If we just have to make this little mural and I put who's discipling you, who is the one that's helping you to get to a more spiritual spot with God, I would hope that we can't just answer God. Because of course God, yes, that is absolutely true, but not just God. There should be people in our lives who we are actively submitting ourselves to in an effort to grow closer to God. It's what Ruth did with Naomi, and it went really well with her. We got to be great at this. This is something that has to be babysat. It's something we got to talk about on a frequent basis. Who is in your life right now that's helping you grow closer to God? And do they know that they're in your life for that reason? We'll close up here. It's in Ruth 4. It's hopefully to kind of wrap everything up in verse 13. So this other guy says, no, I can't be the redeemer. And so Boaz is fired up. He's like, I can be this redeemer here. So Boaz took Ruth in 13 and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. God always blesses us stepping out on faith. And so whenever I was making a decision to follow what Mark said, even if the one time he gave advice that wasn't the best and wasn't awesome, I always read it that this is a decision that I'm making that's a faithful decision. And I trust that God is using Mark to give me this advice. Again, there's somebody in your life I'd put before you is trying to give you some advice. They're trying to tell you something that you really need to make a point to embrace. Our lives need to continue to be called higher by our commitment to give to God and our continual trust in the words of those closest to us. Family, I want to challenge you to follow God until the point it hurts, and then further, and to entrust yourself to people even when it is hard. Amen? Yeah. Sincerity does not equal selflessness. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. If you're in the Kalamazoo area, we'd love to get connected. Please go to kalamazoo.church and fill in your information to come to a Sunday service or any other event that we have going on. In any case, you'll be hearing from us next week.
Saving souls.